Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, another busy week at Retire Smart. We had another round of classes on the ABCs of Medicare and Smart Insurance. Michael Luna, our head of Smart Protection, running the insurance classes. Dustin Galvin, our financial advisor, and Kyle Schroeder, who's going to join us in the second segment of the show, tag teamed on the ABCs of Medicare. Now, Kyle Schroeder, Michael Luna, and Colin Castrick, the estate planning attorney with whom we partner, those three are going to combine for a new class that's entering our rotation. David, would you tell the folks about Senior Asset Solutions?
Yeah, so this is a class to help you understand how the spend down works when it comes to, when we're talking about the spend down, if and when you have to enter into a nursing home facility, assisted living facility, these obviously are quite expensive. Here in Nebraska, assisted living is averaging around $4,600 a month, and full-blown nursing care is about double that. And it's even higher in other states. So if you have parents in other states, this is stuff you'd want to learn about. But there's a 5-year look back in most states. A couple of states have lower rules, exceptions, California being one of them, where you can't give away your assets. In other words, you can't just gift your assets away and then expect the government, the state or the federal government, to pick up the tab. So what this class is understanding all the rules and how there are services, there are products, there are things you can do, whether it's understanding how the rules work and using the right type of insurance product to self-insure or partially insure, et cetera, that you can mitigate or reduce greatly the spend on, even for someone who's in the nursing home now, Chip. So I'd paying attention. If you have any parents that are blessed to still be alive that are 75 or older, this is a class you'd want to attend.
Senior Asset Solutions, Saturday, December 9th, 10 a.m., right here in the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart. It's like all our other classes. There's no charge, no obligation, but it's like all our other classes. You must call and let us know you're coming. Seating is limited, 402-369-7777. More on that as the show progresses. And then finally, David, well, this has become an annual phenomenon now. The Open Door Mission has its Hope for the Hungry Radiothon on local radio. You jumped in again. This year it was a $10,000 match by Retire Smart. And you always seem to enjoy it, and you get them going on the radio.
Well, it's a lot of fun, and the cool thing is the callers match our donation. So basically, we end up raising $20,000 very quickly for an amazing cause at Open Door Mission, and that money goes a long way when it comes to Thanksgiving, giving people a nice warm meal they may not have otherwise had, and then giving them the things they really need, right? Care, access to even some medical, and just a warm pair of socks or underwear.
Socks and underwear.
Yeah, I mean, just amazing.
A toothbrush.
Yeah, some of the most simple and basic things so many of us take for granted. There are so many that are in need and don't have. And unfortunately, I think that need will increase based on where the economy is most likely heading into the winter. So, but anyway, really happy to join Candace and their whole team over at Open Door Mission because this is something we've been doing basically every single year. And we've been blessed to be able to typically increase the amount we donate. And so this year we were able to give them a $10,000 check, which was awesome. So,
well, Candace joined us a few weeks ago, so we were glad to join her on local radio for the Hope for the Hungry Radiothon, another success there. All right, David, into the news we go. Now, there's been this tug of war going on for weeks, months, really. Recession versus, no, soft landing. It's not going to be that bad after all, economically, financially. So, CNBC headline, world economy to perform better than expected in 2024, says Goldman Sachs. Now, I want to get your take on that article because then, David, there are 2 or 3 headlines coming at it from the other direction. Is there any merit that you see in the report and the analysis by Goldman Sachs?
No, in other words, they're acting as if inflation will be at 2 to 2.5% by the first quarter, and they talk about this in the article, and we just don't see it happen. Now, we got a great reading on CPI and PPI, that's Consumer Price Index and the Producer Price Index, this week on Tuesday and Wednesday, respectively, right? And so the market shot up, by the way, 500 points on the Dow. It was a huge update when the CPI came out because everybody's like, oh, the Fed is done, right? So interest rates must be done rising, right? Well, I would tell you, we still have a little bit of a different take, and we'll talk. There's some other articles saying that as well. Now, I don't think the Fed is going to raise anymore on the interest rates. I do think the Fed is done, but I don't think interest rates are done. The 10-year Treasury went all the way down to about 440 on this CPI news, and has rebounded back up already to about 460. And the ranges show us it could easily run back up to 10%, or excuse me, 5%. 10% would really be a big move. And so, we don't think that the economy is fully over the inflation fight. In fact, you had Jerome Powell just come out less than a week ago and state, we're not confident we've beaten it. But we know that there's a lag in the data, right? There's a huge lag in how long it takes to get the data. What destruction have they done to the economy by raising interest rates this fast, as they've done the last 2 years? So there is some concern out there. Our modeling shows that CPI will average around 3.6% all the way through the first half of next year. So the end of this year and quarter 1 and quarter 2 of next year. At least that's what the modeling shows today. UBS is telling you it's a full 100 basis points lower. And I just don't believe it. And, not to say I'm not believing the government's numbers, but the CPI print that came out this week, Chip, it had a 34% reduction in health insurance costs nationwide year over year. Now,
where's that coming from?
Exactly. There's no data to back it up. It's like they just made the number up. And that is shaving about 30 basis points off of the CPI number that supposedly came in better than expected. So, we've been talking about the can you rely on the BLS's data? And I'm sorry, I'm questioning it here because that's just not real. I just talked about our health insurance. We had a 40% increase in health insurance premiums. And so let me know if you got a 30+% discount on your health insurance out there. I'm curious to where they got this data and who they're reporting it from. So I believe that this will adjust back up seasonally, and they have anomalies in the data points, right? But that's why I believe inflation is going to be higher for longer. And so the Fed won't have to raise rates themselves. The rates will rise themselves, which brings us to another article I sent you. UBS thinks the economy is going to falter badly next year, and they think that you're going to see an aggressive cutting of interest rates by the Fed starting as early as March, right? And the Fed will not cut rates, Chip, if they don't have the inflation fight behind them. They're going to cut it once the inflation is going the other way and we go into a deflationary environment. And we've seen oil come down. By the way, that's one of the reasons CPI looked really good. Oil dropped down quite a bit here in the last 30 days or so. If that reaccelerates because the war between Israel and Hamas expands and you see oil spike, that would take away all the positive data that was in that report. But so UBS is telling you they see a clear recession, and that's why the Fed would have to cut rates to try and save the economy for this alleged soft landing.
This is a really aggressive prediction by UPS. The headline is UPS sees a raft of Fed rate cuts next year on the back of a U.S. recession.
When the Fed is accelerating rate cuts to the downside aggressively, that means we are in bad shape. So the last aggressive cut came with COVID, right? We had just started. They waited way too long after the cuts from 08, 09. They basically went to zero, and then they finally in 2012 started to move very slowly. And then when COVID hit, they went straight to zero, right? To try and save the economy. And so if they're going to be doing that, they're telling you they don't see good things on the horizon. And that's what we think you need to be prepared for.
David, you've been talking about the consumer price index. Here's another, actually CNBC did a study in conjunction with the National Retail Federation. And the result is consumer spending fell in October. This is according to credit card transactions. Now, my wife and I bought a new couch, but apparently we were in the minority. Furniture was mentioned as one of the weak categories. So whatever the analysis might be from Goldman Sachs, out there where the consumers live and work and spend, there seems to be a pullback.
Yeah, and I actually was just at a car dealership this week and negotiating a vehicle for one of the companies, and the vehicle is one of these higher priced vehicles. Blessed to be able to drive. But I asked the sales team there, how are sales? And dismal was the word the guy put. He goes, we don't always see it coming. We're seeing it coming now. So they're seeing a pullback in higher ending spending on cars that are, the higher end brand names and so this is the stuff we're warning about. And then you had Target's CEO come out and say, we're seeing a major pullback even on groceries, not just on discretionary items in Targets, but the groceries, which is what they usually count on for just that daily volume of sales. They're seeing a pullback on groceries. And Target actually just reported earnings on Wednesday of this week, and it wasn't a rosy picture, but it was slightly better than expected. And their stock popped 15%. Now their stock is down significantly over the last year, so that pop was like $8 or so. And I don't know if it'll hold or not, but they do not see a rosy outlook. And so when Target and Walmart, the big consumer staple companies, tell you the consumer's cutting, I tend to believe them.
Finally, David, Moody's also has a dim view of the future. This is another CNBC headline. Moody's cuts U.S. outlook to negative, citing deficits and political polarization. Now, when Moody's reduces your credit rating, we had this happen in Omaha a few years ago when our police and fire pension funding system got out of whack. That isn't just an academic or theoretical exercise. That hits you in the wallet as a tax-paying citizen because it's going to be more expensive to pay off your bonds and other forms of debt if your credit rating goes down, correct?
And Moody's the only one that still rates U.S. debt at AAA, but they went from a stable outlook to a negative. So one more downgrade, and we're no longer going to be AAA. There will be AA, and that's most likely on the horizon if we don't change our ways. Now, we've had a lot of changes here. We had the political stuff they were talking about, right? So we have a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, right? And he did a bipartisan bill. And okay, so let's give him kudos there, reaching across the aisle as a speaker and getting something moved forward. What's called a CR, or continuing resolution, and then the Senate easily is going to ratify that. But they had more Democrats vote for it than Republicans. He is a Republican. He had about, I think, 93 not vote for this. And of course, this is what stirred the pot and got Mike McCarthy thrown off the bench, so to speak.
Doing business as usual.
So now I'll give him credit. He's like, hey, let me show the olive branch and reach across the aisle and get him and Chuck Schumer had some press releases, et cetera. So they did it in a two-part. They're basically passed where part of the government is funded till the third week of January and part of it to the first week of February. But now they have to go through the whole appropriations process and get a budget, which we have not had again since 2008. And see if they actually pass a true spending bill next year instead of these continuing CRs, which is what the American public should be fed up with, regardless of political party. And I've talked about this. This rate cut is a shot across the bow, Chip, because you're right. In the end, it means we are going to have to pay more for our debt. We had almost a no-bid auction on the 30-year Treasury. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. In other words, people backed away. If we're going to buy your debt, we think we deserve a little higher interest rate. You're not quite the credit rating you once were. It's just like if you have bad credit and you go get a car loan, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. You're subprime, and that's what we don't want to end up with. And again, we talked about the hedge fund guys calling out Drunken Miller and Bill Ackman, et cetera, talking about Janet Yellen should have refinanced all of our debts while interest rates were less than half of what they are today, but continue to ignore it and act like it wasn't a problem. And it is a major problem, $1 trillion in interest. I mean, my goodness. So, yeah, not great, and we'll see where this goes in the first quarter, but I would be prepared for a lot of ugliness, and this is why we think interest rates may go higher, not lower, as some people are saying, even though inflation looks like it's taming, because the government's going to be forced to pay higher interest rates to get people to willing to buy its debt. And they got to refinance over $8.9 billion in the next 8.9 trillion in the next 24 months.
These are the consequences when you are not proactive. These are the consequences when you fail to plan ahead. That's why we offer the complimentary report card. No charge, no obligation. 402-369-7777. Review your whole financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make some changes, and we will offer recommendations on what you might want to do going forward. The complimentary report card. 402-369-7777. Up next, we're in the home stretch of the annual open enrollment period for Medicare. Our resident authority on Medicare is Kyle Schroeder, and he joins us next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. The M in a SMART plan stands for medical and other health expenses. Medicare and Medicaid are right in the middle of all that. It is vital that you know your options and exercise them properly to optimize your coverage. We have someone on our team dedicated to helping you do that. David, please introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Chip. Yeah, so in the studio for the first time, we have Kyle Schroeder. So Kyle is not an employee of Retire Smart. Kyle is an independent agent. He actually works with one of our affiliated companies called Senior Asset Solutions. Full disclosure, my wife is an equity partner in that company. But he is our resident authority, if you will, on Medicare, especially Medicare Part D. We've had the biggest amount of changes probably in the history's program. This program's been around for 19 years, this coming formulary year, and you've been able to help. Well, heck, I know personally, like 5 or 6 of my clients, save collectively over $10,000 next year in copays and formularies. So Kyle, first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's been a lot of fun here.
So you've been doing this a while now. You're pretty well versed in the ins and outs of all 4 parts of Medicare. In fact, this past week, you and Dustin, one of our advisors, put on a couple classes. Those went over very well. Feedback was really good, and you're able to help people make decisions. Now, there are some things people need to be aware of for timelines, right? Because we are getting to the end of what we call the open enrollment season for Medicare that ends every year on Pearl Harbor Day, ironically, huh?
That is ironic there, and that is a very important date that you want to keep in mind, not only this year, but every year. That's December 7th. You want to stamp that into your mind. October 15th through December 7th is when you can, it's called open enrollment season, and that's when you can double check anything with a drug plan attached to it. So Advantage plans or a prescription drug plan, the Medicare supplements can actually be checked year round, but anything with a drug plan attached to it, you need to check by December 7th.
And let's just talk about that for just a moment. So when you buy a supplemental plan, which is what the majority of our clients typically end up doing, and we can help you understand which side is right for you, and that's part of the class that Kyle just taught with Dustin but the government is not really involved in those. It's a private insurance carrier covering what the government doesn't through Medicare A and B, right? So you're buying private coverage. But once you get into Part D, which is a government-administered program, by the way, still the only large government program ever to still be under budget from its original forecast. But that now you're getting into a government is subsidizing, either your drug cards or the Advantage plans known as Medicare Part C. So when the government's involved, that's where the regulations and the time windows come involved. So it's very important if you have a supplemental plan like a Plan J, a Plan F, a Plan G, a Plan N, you can switch those any time of year. In fact, you can always call Kyle here any time of the year. And so, in fact, some clients are like, hey, we'll look at that in January. Let's focus on your drug card right now because there is a clock and you have to take action if you want to make any changes.
That is correct. One thing you want to keep in mind with the Medicare supplements, as opposed to the Advantage plans, you do have to pass underwriting. So, the companies typically ask about 15 to 20 questions. If you can pass those, you can typically save money on your Medicare supplement. So,
very cool. So that's really important to understand. So now let's just talk about the kind of the savings you've uncovered. In fact, there's a new drug card that came to market in our marketplace this year that is just 50 cents. And so that's a pretty good option for those that are like me that really never take prescription drugs. But if you don't sign up for the card when you're eligible, you're going to end up with a penalty later. So that's a great way to kind of get around that penalty, right?
Right. My grandma is a perfect example here. 15 years ago, she didn't take a drug plan because she took no prescriptions. Later in life, she needed prescriptions, and there was a penalty for every year that she didn't take one. But the drug plans were $20 or $30 a month back then. Now there is a plan as low as 50 cents for folks that don't take any prescriptions or maybe a couple generics. So in order to avoid that penalty, it's a very good idea, just at least to get on that one. Right?
Absolutely. And it's really important, too, is it's agnostic. So if you're a married couple, what Bob has may be a different card than what Mary has. It's individual coverage that you want to focus on here. You don't want to just be, and so this is why I always say avoid what we call captive agents. In my opinion, you want to steer clear of that because they can only sell you the company that they represent or work for, right?
That's exactly right. And, I'll run drug plans for anybody. And if I don't sell for that company, I'm still going to let them know that's the lowest plan for them. And that's what everybody should be doing. There's 10,000 seniors turning 65 every day, and we need to all come together and see how we can take care of everybody to do the right things for them. So
absolutely. Well, speaking of doing the right thing, we just last week had we celebrated Veterans Day. Both my brother and my father are veterans, and thank you for your service for anyone who has served out there. But you have some programs that you can help specifically veterans understand how to utilize the system, whether they are going to be on things like TRICARE for life or not, or just pairing with VA benefits, how to understand where and what they should be looking at to make sure they're maximizing the benefits available to them and in saving the most money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've run into over my 15-year career is, veterans. It's always a lot of confusion there. If you're on TRICARE when you are entering Medicare age 65, you need to sign up for Medicare Part B 3 months prior to your birthday, and then you'll have TRICARE for life. It's very important you get in there 3 months prior. You have to have Medicare to get TRICARE for life. Then you don't need a Medicare supplement with TRICARE for life. I'll run into a lot of folks that buy one, and really you don't need one. However, there are some, there is a particular Advantage plan. Not going to get into specifics about it, but it works directly with folks, our veterans on TRICARE for life. And then there's just so much to know about, if you're not on TRICARE for life, but a veteran, how the VA works with Medicare. If you're on VA, you have to go to VA hospitals and doctors. If you're on Medicare, you can't go to VA doctors. If you have them together, then you have some options.
No, I had to do this. I took my father with me to a conference in the Bahamas. Now, my dad is in his 80s. He's a veteran who served, and so he has to go to a VA hospital, and for some things he has to go to outside doctors, right? It's just the way our systems work. So I literally, the day I flew to South Carolina and spent the entire day before we left to go to the conference, taken around in a wheelchair to 7 different doctors inside the VA hospital where he goes to on his regular visits in South Carolina, then to 2 outside doctors to get all the clearances to take him internationally traveling. And I mean, I was like, man, the amount of work it was, but to understand how, my dad's become a pretty good expert of navigating his hospital. He's like, no, turn here. We go to this one first, and then we'll get to that one. We can cut in line. Well, let me show you how this works. I mean, there's nuances to all these systems, and imagine that. And it's designed by the government, so probably not going to be the most efficient. And so it helps to have somebody who's coached or worked with people in these type of systems, and you've got a lot of experience in this area. So I think if you're a veteran out there, bottom line, and you're not sure what your benefits are, you may want to give Kyle a call. We'll show you how to get in touch with him here shortly. But I want to pivot real quick, Kyle, before we run out of time today, and I want to talk about those that are still working, that are approaching 65 or have recently turned 65. And a lot of those folks think it's best to just stay on their workplace insurance benefits. And this came up, one of our own employees. I never would have known this employee was 65. And you never can ask, legally in the interview. This employee started with us last year and she does a great job. But you came to me, hey, can I get the data on your employee plan, what she will have to be paying out of pocket, et cetera, and what it is, because she may be able to go on Medicare. And this not only can save the employee money, it can save the employer money. So it's really important if you're 65 or older or going to be turning 65 in the near future and you're still planning on working, and that's very common today, to make sure you have someone to analyze it should you actually stay on the workplace benefits, right?
Yeah, there's so many things to consider. It's a case-by-case scenario. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You really need to just go over all of your options. It's not my job to push you in one direction or another. It's no agent's job to do that. It's just to educate you and show you all your options, do some calculations, and see where you're most comfortable. Now I'll help guide you to one if you can't make, if you can't come to a decision. But really, that's what I run into most is the confusion on, do I take Medicare and stay on my plan? Do I delay Medicare? There's so many different enrollment periods to consider, but all these situations, veterans, employers, low income, everybody's different, and everybody needs to look at their plans and their situation.
Absolutely. And there's a lot to factor in there. What tax bracket are you in? What is your income? How long are you going to plan to continue working? Like if somebody's just going to work 3 months past their 65th, I'm retiring June 1st. Well, you may want to get off that plan and get set up now on Medicare, et cetera. There's a lot to go into that. So that's the kind of stuff you can reach out to Kyle, and you can just call our office at 402-369-7777. We will get you scheduled with Kyle or get you a call back from Kyle at your earliest convenience. Now, we have another class that you are helping to teach with Michael Luna, and that is put on by Senior Asset Solutions. And this is for basically, this class is for helping people understand the spend down rules when it comes to Medicaid. Okay, not Medicare, Medicaid. And an easy way to remember this, folks, is Medicare, care for the elderly. That's what our healthcare system is supposed to do post 65. Medicaid is to aid the poor or the less fortunate, or to help aid those that are going to end up in nursing homes and need long-term care, which is not covered by traditional Medicare for the most part. So the Medicaid planning, you can self-insure, you can buy various forms of long-term care insurance, or you can buy these new hybrid policies, which is typically the way we recommend if you want to insure the coverage. But if somebody's going in there, you can actually still help them protect the assets from what we call the 5-year look back, right? So they don't have to spend all their hard-earned assets and into the nursing home. You guys have a class teaching people how to take advantage of the Medicaid rules so that you can avoid what we call the dreaded spend down, right?
Absolutely. There's at least 12,000 people right now that could use this product and the help avoiding that 5-year look back period. And we work with an attorney here in-house, an elder law attorney, but it's all about protecting the assets. My grandma and grandpa, real quick, they both lost almost everything they had from the nursing home. Had I known about this product, we could have actually saved the family and the assets, about half the assets there. So it's just about, if you know somebody in a nursing home that's using their own money to fund it, there are solutions. And as an insurance agent, we don't charge any fees for you to come in just for an initial, talk.
So that is put on by Senior Asset Solutions. So that class is going to be Saturday morning, December 9th at 10 a.m. And I encourage you, if you have a parent who's in their 80s or 90s and is about to go into a home or is in a home, and you're concerned about the assets they're spending down, which will ultimately be the inheritance for kids or grandkids, or you're the one who's contemplating going in there, you would want to come to this class and learn about the strategies and services available to you to mitigate or reduce that spend down by significant dollars, most of the time in the hundreds of thousands of dollars difference in the outcomes of these cases. So we are out of time for this week. So there's a lot we just covered there. Again, if you'd like to come to that class or get a hold of Kyle for any of your questions, you need to call and register for the class, 402-369-7777. Kyle, thank you so much for stopping by this week.
Thanks a lot, David.
All right, Chip, what do we have next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about taxes. Did you see that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is leaving Seattle for Miami? He says it's for personal reasons and to be closer to his space business. But don't you think taxes are a factor? I gotta believe the tax burden is lighter in Florida than it is in Washington State. How do you see this one, David?
Well, Washington State and Florida are two of the states that have no income tax.
So that's a wash, huh?
Well,
okay.
there are other taxes, so let's talk about that. So if he were to start a new venture, and by the way, Miami has been trying to tantalize him to come there. They were one of the companies that bid for the HQ2 years ago. And if you remember, they were going to have their second headquarters, et cetera, and they rolled out all kinds of tax incentives. So most likely the move is based on financial and asset protection levels. And if he were to fire up some new divisions and add employees, so he has a company called Blue Origins, which is his space company, kind of like SpaceX with Elon Musk, and they used a lot of the engineers from Boeing out in Everett, Washington area, right where in the Seattle area where he's from. But he wants to build that out in Florida because that will be much cheaper on the corporate tax rate, on the property tax rate, and the tax incentives to expand that company and or any of the offshoots that will become Amazon. And we still believe that Amazon will ultimately be broken into multiple companies. Now, this is a longer term view, but there was a couple of white papers written on this years ago explaining how, their web services may become its own company. It's the largest purveyor of internet traffic in the world, bigger than anyone else. And people don't realize that they're the ones that host a lot of websites. Any place you go, when you click on a company's website, you see up in the corner AWS as part of the letters in that long list on the browser. That's an Amazon Web Services service. And so, it will behoove him for tax reasons, yes, but long term. But there's no change on his income tax.
I think of him as being retired, as being out of it, but it sounds to me like you think, oh no, he's not done in the business world.
No, these guys always have other projects and things
Okay.
are going to start up. And so he simply wants to live in a place where he may be able to grow these new entities he wants to fire up. And obviously he's going to be pretty close there, a quick helicopter ride up, and he can watch launches from the Cape, which is where they do a lot of the launches. Obviously, I used to live right there. And so Blue Origins, has built quite a presence in Brevard County where I used to live, and so is SpaceX. And so I will tell you, the great news is space travel and the cost per payload, Chip, it's down over 90% from when these companies started, right? With the way our government bloats and wastes budgetary dollars. So the innovation has really helped lower the cost to access to space. Now, it's still not prime time for, the space tourism stuff, but we'll see. And of course, Blue Origin has never actually made the outer orbits yet. They've just gotten to the low, technically what you call space, basically around 60,000 feet up or whatever. So anyway.
Next question, David, is about artificial intelligence and Bitcoin. Charlie Munger recently said AI and Bitcoin were stupid investments. Do you agree?
I wouldn't say stupid, but yeah, I do remember his comments on there. Now, look, kudos to Charlie Munger. He always talked about don't invest in things you don't understand, right? That's been one of the mantras. I mean, even Warren Buffett said that as well. And they missed Amazon early. They missed some companies they would have invested in, like even Microsoft. And Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are pretty good chums. They play chess against each other. They vacation together in Palm Springs. But he didn't really invest heavily in his companies because he didn't understand it, right? So Charlie Munger, who's going to be 100 on his next birthday, kind of the curmudgeon attitude, oh, they're stupid. Now, I don't necessarily think they're where you should be placing your retirement dollars, hard-earned dollars, but you certainly want to understand them. By the way, we do have a class coming up December 13th, I think. I don't have it on schedule today, for digital assets, so you can understand things like Bitcoin. What does it mean? What does it do? What's the technology behind it? And Brad Stark, one advisor, will be teaching that. But I don't necessarily think they're stupid, but I do not think they're a core asset for you to just throw your hard-earned money into either.
Brad Stark, and our financial advisor, will be joining us in a few weeks to talk more about another class that we're adding to the rotation. In the meantime, David, now here's a question. This was you and I visiting with clients in the lobby just this last week. And I asked, hey, could we put that on the radio show? They said, yeah, sure. So here's the question. My wife and I have heard you talk on the radio about a home equity line of credit as a safety measure to block title theft. We have several properties. Should we take out a HELOC on each? Is there a way to consolidate them into one HELOC? What do you recommend?
All right, so first off, let's define what a HELOC is. That's HELOC. That's a home equity line of credit. Now, it's a line of credit. It is not a mortgage, okay? But it is a lien on your home. So when you pay off your home, if you watch, any of the news channels at night, it might be CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax, wherever you get your stuff from, there are tons of commercials running there and on talk radio about title theft. It's very real. People steal your title. When you pay off your title, they go pull a lien out, forge your documents, and take a mortgage out on your home without you knowing it. And so that is the fear people have. You've worked your whole life to pay this home off. So if you have a mortgage in a first position, in other words, you go set up a HELOC. I have one on my home. Okay, you can go set up. So let's say your house is, for this example, valued at $500,000. They will give you a HELOC up to 80% loan to value in certain circumstances. You wouldn't necessarily need that. So let's just say you took one out for 50% loan to value. You set up a line of credit for $250,000 against your home, the equity in your home, and you draw on it like a checkbook. I have one, and it's very easy to access. So I can get cash, tax-free, Chip. I can grab cash out. I use this very often to buy rental properties. So let's say I'm going to buy a rental property for $200,000, I use my HELOC to make a cash offer for the rental property. So now I have $200,000 cash to go close. So I'm in the front of the line with my offer, right? Because I'm a cash offer, no contingencies. Then I can go set up a mortgage on the house after I've closed, a traditional mortgage, and have my renter pay off that mortgage, take the cash back from the mortgage, and pay my HELOC back off, right? So I can use it as a tool. But
is it like a credit card? If I stay current each month, then I won't have to pay any interest.
Well, yeah, if you pay it off every month, there'd be no interest, but you only pay interest on the average daily balance. One, it's a tool you can show you how to use to prepay other debts, but that's not for today's topic. But the value of it is, even if you don't draw on it, and typically they're going to make you draw initially. So, hey, we need to take $50,000 draw it, sit it in your bank account for one day and pay it back the next day. But now you have a line of credit for $250,000. So if I'm a thief and I wanted to go see if I could can steal your home. Oh no, there's a $250,000 senior note on that home. I can't steal your title. You follow me? So it's a protective measure that doesn't cost anything, like these title services that are selling their services for $39 or $49 a month. Save yourself the $600, in my humble opinion, and just set up a HELOC. And it works really good. Now, Chip, I lived in Florida forever. This was a valuable tool for our clients when we go through hurricanes. Blue tarp syndrome comes around, and so the first in line with cash to pay the guy, your roof gets fixed first, and you can file your insurance claim, get the money 60 days later, and pay your HELOC back. So you can use it for an emergency line of credit as well. And again, it's tax-free access to capital. Huge.
David, we're out of time for Q&A this week, but if people would like to schedule a discovery call with a question about retirement, how many openings this week?
Just 4. Due to the holidays, we only have 4 of those available. Take advantage. They will fill fast.
402-369-7777. No charge, no obligation. Would you like to schedule a phone conference with one of our licensed advisors? 402-369-7777. Up next, repercussions from the UAW strike and settlement are starting to show up. We'll tell you about it next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, here's the headline from CNBC. Stellantis offers buyouts to roughly half of U.S. salaried workers. So I'm not sure. Is this targeting white-collar workers so the blue-collar workers are okay, or should they be nervous?
This is a little bit of everything in there.
Okay.
So, yeah, across the board, they're trying to get rid of their older workforce that just got all these raises guaranteed by the new contracts, which have not yet been actually ratified by all union members, by the way. But I always say, be careful what you ask for. You push these 30% increases in labor.
Well, you know, Trump said that to the rank and file, said, are you sure you want what your leadership is pushing for here? Because it could end up putting you out of work.
It's exactly what's happening. We've seen this with Ford already. Now we're seeing it with Stellantis, which is basically Chrysler, right? And you're going to see the same thing happen across Chevy and other auto manufacturers. So again, be careful what you wish for when you push too hard on these unions, and they push too hard. The only choice is they got to get it ratified so they can get production going back up, so the companies agree to it, and then they go out and figure out how to undermine this and offload or offshore work, which is what we saw massively happen in the 80s, and unions went too far. Again, unions have a place. I'm a pro-union guy if they're used appropriately, right? It's when they go too far, they really punish the union member rank and file, because now there'll be less people employed, less people earning these wages, less people getting the cost of living that they were fighting so hard for. So just be careful out there.
David, you said during our team meeting this week that market performance is a little misleading, that the big 7 are doing great, and that's what's carrying it. And I found this story at Barron's that bears that out. Apple, NVIDIA, rest of big tech have been winners. Now it's time for S&P 500's other 493 stocks. And you use some terms in there, equal weight versus market weight. Could you sort that out for us and then give us your take on the current state of the market?
Sure. So if you were to go back and look at, so the S&P 500 is a market weighted index. So the biggest company gets the biggest weighting. So those top 7 companies are almost 31% of the weighting of the index by their sheer size, right? Apple's a $3 trillion company. If you were, instead of market weighting them, Chip, if you were to equal all 500 companies in the index and give them each the equal weighting, which would basically be like 0.2%, right? Give them all the equal weighting and then measure the index that way, it would actually be flat for the year. In fact, Bank of America just yesterday put out a piece of news showing that it's the biggest divergence, tech stocks over the rest of the index in history, greater than the dot-com bubble. Right? The disparity, and they always revert to the mean. So you have sectors that get ahead of the general market. That happens, and technology right now is so far ahead. It's never been this far ahead, and they always revert to the mean. And this is what we explain to people. Is that the roller coaster you want to be on? Are you sure you're comfortable? If that's kind of what your portfolio is made up of, be cautious, because if you want to look at this, there's a ticker. It's called RSP. That is an ETF that represents the equal weight S&P 500. And you can go back and track this for the last
that
20
would be an
years.
exchange traded fund.
That is
right?
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So that ETF, and then you could put in like SPY, which would be an ETF that represents the S&P 500. And if you ran those for the last 20 years, you'll see the S&P 500 is up about 230% over that time period. The equal weight is up about 330% over that time period. So the equal weight usually, in other words, diversified portfolios usually outperform over the long haul. But that has been very different the last couple of years. The disruption of COVID, we had what we call the FANG stocks lead the way, and now we have what they refer to the Magnificent Seven. So the point here is just be cautious with the amount of risk you're taking in your portfolio.
Final item this week, David. You sent me a tweet by Dave Ramsey. Now, we don't make a habit of going after other people, but I have seen in several news feeds, financial news feeds, a lot of people were triggered by this. And your comment to me was, Ramsey is so wrong. He's going to run folks out of money. What happened?
On his podcast and television show, which is nationally broadcast, he had a caller call in and say, hey, I'm a little conservative side. I've saved up more than enough money, I believe. I want to take a withdrawal rate of 3%. Okay. And by the way, 4% has kind of been the old, there's something called the 4% rule. You need to be careful about that. Morningstar just did a study validating what's called the 4% rule. But basically, the idea, if you save, let's just say $1 million for retirement, Chip, you can withdraw about 4% of your principal balance every year, right? And because of the growth of what it's invested in, diversified portfolio, you should never run out of money, right? So that it would carry you through a retirement period. Dave Ramsey, a guy called in and said, I just want to be a little conservative going 3%. And he basically yelled at the guy and said, 3%, 4%. And he goes, well, that's what your guy told me. One of his chief financial plan, guys that does this.
One of Ramsey's guys.
Yeah. Now, I want to first point out, Dave Ramsey holds no licensing. Insurance, securities, nothing. I don't know how he can give advice on the radio legally without the SEC jumping down his throat. But that's what he's doing. But anyway, that's a whole nother problem. He's never passed a licensing exam in his life. All right, so I love him telling people to get out of debt. I'm all for that. I've actually been involved with financial peace, etc. But this was blatant. I mean, this is abuse. He told the caller, you should withdraw 8% a year of your portfolio because your portfolio should be making 12% every single year.
12%?
Oh, he goes, it's easy to beat the S&P. I'm like, ask anybody with a license to say that. So I take a lot of issue with this. And like I said, if you had $1 million and you drew down 8% per year, Dave, I got news for you. The market doesn't go up every year, right? So if you did that last year, Chip, when the equity market was down 20%, so if you had $1 million and you were going to take out 80,000 and it lost 20%, you would only have $720,000 to start this year. Now you take another $80,000 out, and the market, even if it's up 10% year to date, you're not at $700,000 at the end of this year. You would have lost 30% of your principal in just 2 years. That is, this is bad. Really bad. And I'm sorry, I had to call him out, and lots of other financial firms have called him out because this is an egregious misstep, and it's going to harm people.
So it's a double whammy: withdrawing too aggressively and overestimating returns.
Absolutely. And that's why you need to have a diversified portfolio. We just talked about that. And have an actual written financial plan with an income plan, inflation adjusted, know where you can count on your income and understand how you're going to get taxed. There's so many factors that go into it. I know we're out of time for the week, Chip, but listen, just work with an independent fiduciary professional. It doesn't have to be our firm, but whoever you work with, make sure they have your best interest at heart, have the experience and licensing you're looking for before you just jump and read an article on the internet or watch somebody's podcast.
Well, that's what the report card is for. Take advantage of that. In the meantime, don't forget Senior Asset Solutions, a new class in our rotation of classes. There's no charge, there's no obligation, but you must call to register. Saturday, December 9th, 10 a.m., right here at the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart, 402-369-7777. Are you looking for some solutions, especially regarding Medicaid and how to handle your finances? Senior Asset Solutions, Saturday, December 9th, 10 a.m., right here at the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart. Register by calling 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, have a blessed and happy Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday, because there's nothing in it but just giving thanks, and have a great meal. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week. Kyle Schroeder is not a client of Retire Smart and was not compensated for his appearance. Senior Asset Solutions is not affiliated with Retire Smart, but is partially owned by David's wife, Melissa Brooks. Furthermore, Senior Asset Solutions is a tenant of and may share clients with Retire Smart.